On June 6, 1944, more than 156,000 Allied soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy, but for over 1,500 Americans, their names vanished with the tide, unknown, unclaimed, and buried far from home. The accepted history focused on victory, yet beneath the sands, silent evidence and strands of DNA hid stories no war diary could record. When scientists began unlocking the identities and origins buried for decades, it wasn't just lost soldiers who re-emerged, it was entire family histories, unexpected ancestral ties, and mistakes that changed what we thought we knew about those who fought for freedom. If DNA could rewrite the past, what have we been missing about the true faces of D-Day? The answer starts with a single, lost name. Before dawn on June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious invasion in history began to unfold along the coast of Normandy. The numbers alone defy imagination. 156,115 Allied troops crossed the English Channel that day, packed into landing craft, gliders, and paratrooper planes. The American contingent alone numbered over 73,000, while British and Canadian forces brought more than 61,000 to the beaches and drop zones. The first waves met a wall of fire, machine guns, mortars, mines hidden beneath the sand. In a single day, more than 10,300 men were counted as casualties. By nightfall, thousands lay wounded or dead, the cost of every yard of sand measured in blood. The chaos was total. Officers lost track of units as men scattered under fire. Medics worked in the open, often unable to reach the fallen. Some men died with their dog tags missing or torn away, their bodies hurriedly buried in makeshift graves marked only by a rifle or a wooden stake. Official records struggled to keep pace with the carnage. The Normandy American Cemetery now holds 9,388 graves, but more than 1,500 of those are marked only as unknown. The British and Canadian cemeteries tell a similar story, rows of headstones, each one a life cut short, some with no name at all. The scale of loss was not just a matter of numbers, but of identity. For every soldier left unnamed, a family waited for news that never came. Letters home stopped abruptly. Photographs on mantles faded while questions lingered for generations. The statistics, thousands missing, hundreds buried without identification, became a silent crisis that would haunt the survivors and shape the memory of D-Day for decades. Only now, with new tools and science, do we begin to understand just how many stories were lost in the fog of war. In the hours after the landings, the sheer number of casualties overwhelmed every system meant to keep track of the dead. Soldiers fell in unfamiliar fields, on beaches churned by shell fire, and in hedgerows tangled with barbed wire. Many bodies were buried where they lay, sometimes by fellow soldiers who had no time or materials for proper markers. A helmet, a shovel, or a broken plank served as a grave marker, if anything at all. Dog tags, supposed to be the last safeguard of identity, often failed. Made of thin aluminum, they corroded quickly in the salty air and damp soil of Normandy. Some were lost in the chaos, torn from necks by blast, or by the hasty hands of medics and stretcher bearers. In other cases, tags were removed intentionally to prevent disease or theft, but never made it back to the record keepers. The official process for recording the dead broke down under the pressure of constant movement. Units advanced, retreated, or were cut off entirely, leaving behind makeshift graves with no one left to record who lay within. Field burial teams, when they could operate, worked with whatever information they had, sometimes only a uniform fragment or a patch. Records kept in field notebooks vanished in the mud or were destroyed by fire. The result was a growing list of the missing and a growing number of graves with no names. By the time the war ended, more than 1,500 Americans were buried in Normandy as unknowns. British and Canadian cemeteries faced the same problem, their headstones engraved simply with "A Soldier of the From 1939 to 1945, War Known Unto God." Families received letters with only the barest details, if any. For many, the fate of a brother or son became a blank space in the family story. The silent rows of unnamed graves became a symbol of the confusion and heartbreak that followed D-Day, a reminder that the cost of war is not only measured in numbers, but in the loss of identity itself. In the summer of 2018, a construction crew in the outskirts of St. Lo brought their bulldozer to a halt. The machine's blade had struck something unexpected just beneath the soil, a patch of faded cloth tangled with bone. Within minutes, the site was cordoned off by French authorities, and archaeologist Jean-Yves Langlois from INRAP was called to assess the find. The area, once a hedgerow-lined battlefield in July 1944, had been silent for decades, but the ground still held its secrets. Langlois and his team worked carefully, sifting through layers of earth that had not been disturbed since the war. Small metallic objects began to surface: the corroded clip from an M1 Garand rifle, fragments of a helmet liner, and a rusted canteen. Soil samples were collected for analysis, while every artifact was logged and mapped to preserve the context of the burial. A torn piece of uniform, still bearing the faint outline of a U.S. Army insignia, provided the first real clue to the soldier's nationality. The remains were transferred to the Centre de Recherche et de Sauvegarde de la Nation in Caen, where forensic teams used portable X-ray fluorescence to test the metallic fragments and soil for traces of wartime alloys. This technology, now standard in field archaeology, helped confirm the period of the burial and linked the equipment to American forces engaged in the St. Lo sector during the summer of 1944. The find was crucial. With the identity still unknown, the case was handed over to the Defense POWMIA accounting agency. Specialists prepared bone samples for DNA extraction, hoping to recover enough genetic material to begin the process of identification. Even after decades underground, the combination of modern science and careful archaeological work had reopened a chapter of the past. The accidental discovery at St. Lo was not just a matter of chance. It was the beginning of a new investigation, one that would rely on both physical evidence and the power of DNA to restore a name to a soldier lost for more than 70 years. In June 2019, the quiet rhythm of construction at Vierville-sur-Mer shattered when a backhoe operator spotted bone fragments in a sandy trench just above Omaha Beach. The work halted instantly. By French law, any discovery of human remains on historic ground triggers a mandatory stop, regardless of the project's scale or cost. In this case, a €10 million beachfront development paused midstream. Local authorities rushed to the scene, cordoning off the area with police tape as archaeologists from INRAP, led by Benoit Bertrand, arrived to take charge. Time was critical. The remains rested in a layer of soil shaped by 75 years of tides and shifting sands. Within 12 hours, the team erected tents to shield the site from the elements, marking every artifact's location to preserve the story written in the earth. Stratigraphic analysis revealed a compressed timeline. The bones lay only inches below a scatter of 1940s debris, their position undisturbed since the days following the invasion. The dig soon revealed a complex tangle of history. Alongside the skeletal remains, archaeologists uncovered a battered M1 helmet, American webbing, and a parachute harness. Nearby, a rusted Ross rifle pointed to Canadian involvement, hinting at the multinational chaos that marked those first days ashore. Each object was logged, photographed, and bagged with precise coordinates, forming a chain of evidence that would later prove vital for identification. The process was slow, deliberate, and watched by both local officials and heritage advocates. Tensions ran high as the project's backers pressed for a quick resolution, but French heritage law left no room for shortcuts. Every bone fragment and artifact passed through the hands of INRAP specialists before being transferred to the Centre de Recherche et de Sauvegarde de la Nation in Caen. There, forensic teams prepared samples for DNA analysis, careful to avoid contamination that could erase the fragile genetic clues. By nightfall, the site stood silent again, the ground restored but forever changed. The Vierville excavation set a new standard for battlefield recovery, combining legal rigor, archaeological precision, and scientific foresight. The remains and artifacts, now carefully cataloged, formed the last physical link in a chain that would soon pass from the hands of archaeologists to the laboratories where DNA would speak for the voiceless. Inside the Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory, the process begins with silence and a single fragment of bone, sometimes weighing less than 1/4 of a gram. Technicians in white coats work behind sealed doors, their movements measured and precise. Every sample is logged, cleaned, and prepared under strict protocols to avoid even the faintest trace of contamination. The remains of a D-Day soldier, recovered from a Normandy hedgerow or beach, are first ground into fine powder, releasing whatever genetic material time has spared. Next comes DNA extraction. For remains that have spent decades underground, the challenge is enormous. Cells are broken down, their contents dissolved into solution. At this stage, even a few picograms of DNA can make the difference between success and another unknown. Quantitative PCR measures the yield, searching for mitochondrial DNA, which is more resilient than nuclear DNA and passes unchanged from mother to child. If the soldier is male and the sample is viable, Y chromosome markers are also targeted, tracing paternal lines. The real breakthrough arrived in 2016 when the lab adopted next-generation sequencing, or NGS. This technology, originally built for mapping the human genome, can read hundreds of thousands of genetic markers at once, even from the most degraded samples. With NGS, the odds of generating a usable DNA profile from a tiny 70-year-old bone fragment jumped from less than 20% to nearly 70%. In some cases, just 0.2 grams of bone, about the weight of a paperclip, provides enough material to unlock a family's past. Once a profile is built, the data enters a secure database where it is compared against thousands of family reference samples collected over decades. Scientists look for matches in the unique patterns of mitochondrial DNA or Y STRs, building kinship networks that can stretch across continents. If a likely match appears, the team double-checks every step, running controls and reviewing the chain of custody. Only when the genetic evidence is overwhelming do they move forward. Every case is a race against time and the limits of science. Yet each successful identification begins with these careful, methodical steps, a blend of forensic rigor and hope, that one day a name might be restored to a headstone that has stood silent for generations. When the laboratory's work ends, a name is not just added to a list. It is spoken aloud, sometimes for the first time in generations, and a family receives an answer they thought would never come. In 2024, the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency confirmed the identity of Private First Class Earl O. Dahl, once known only as X8165, whose remains had rested beneath a Utah beach grave marker for nearly 80 years. DNA from a niece and nephew, combined with records and fragments of uniform, closed the circle. Dahl, the son of Norwegian immigrants, had crossed the Atlantic to fight in the land of his ancestors. His grave now bears his name, and his family's long vigil has ended. Stories like Dahl's are becoming more common. Since the first successful DNA identifications in the late 1990s, more than 60 D-Day unknowns have been named, with the DPAA aiming to reach an 80% identification rate by 2030. Artificial intelligence now helps predict matches with over 90% confidence, accelerating the process as more families come forward to provide reference samples. Each new case brings its own surprises. DNA analysis has revealed that nearly 1/4 of U.S. soldiers on D-Day were first or second generation Americans, with roots stretching from Ireland and Italy to Eastern Europe and Scandinavia. The diversity found in the ranks, once hidden behind standardized uniforms and silent headstones, now comes into focus, reshaping our understanding of who fought on the beaches of Normandy. The process is not without its corrections. In 2015, the remains labeled as Canadian were re-identified as American after Y chromosome testing contradicted assumptions based on gear and burial location. These reversals are reminders that the story of D-Day is still being written, and that science can restore not just names, but truths lost to the confusion of war. For families, the impact runs deeper than history. When a name is restored to a grave, it is more than a correction of the record. It is the end of a question that lingered for decades. A brother, a father, or a son finally brought home. In the words of one niece, it's like getting him back. The work continues, and with each new identification, the story of D-Day becomes not only a record of loss, but a testament to memory and belonging. Today, DNA continues to restore names and family stories to graves once marked unknown. Every new identification reminds us these soldiers were not just numbers, they were sons, brothers, and immigrants, their roots as complex as the world they fought to change. As science uncovers more, each discovery is a promise, no sacrifice is forgotten. If this resonated, share your thoughts below.